Chapter 1 Death Omen Part 2. Moonlight filtered through the dense canopy, turning the forest floor silver and still. The only sound was the babble of a shallow brook threading through the underbrush like a network of veins. The calm stillness is a stark contrast to the battles most recently waged and of those yet to come in the tournament. 5 figures in matching red robes and one lone green-robed figure move through the forest, collecting sticks and twigs to bring back to their makeshift campsite on the beach. Sinnoh raised a hand, seeing something the others couldn't. Even in a passive state, his GX parasite granted him a level of perception far beyond that of normal humans. "Hold on," he whispered. "There's someone up ahead at the stream." The others immediately halted, their boots no longer crunching against the leafy underbrush. "What is it?" Danny whispers. "Can you tell who they are?" "I've never seen them before," Sinnoh replies with unease. "They aren't anyone from the tournament." "I wonder if they know the bracket's already been set," Butler asks. "They might as well just go home." "There's something off about them," Sinnoh cautions, remaining intensely focused. Allure is the first to notice that his eyes have transformed, pushing his GX parasite out of dormancy to see the potential threat more clearly. The mage's pupils become vertical slits to allow for greater depth perception, and in the low light conditions, reduce glare while maintaining a sharper focus. "They look human, but not quite. I can't put my finger on it, but something just isn't right." Drawing her sword, Zaya steps forward. "We'll investigate it together, and if they're a threat, we'll deal with them." The mages walk into the clearing, getting their first good view of the figure. At the edge of the stream, a pale figure knelt, her tangled hair covering her face like a black veil. She scrubbed furiously at a cloth. No, a robe, stained in deep crimson, the water around her blooming red like ink on paper. Despite the intrusion by the mages, she did not look up. "Hello?" Danny asks. "Ma'am, are you okay?" "Danny, stay back," Sinnoh says, his voice suddenly a deep growl. "I know what that thing is, and it isn't human. I didn't at first, but now it's all too obvious." "What? What is it?" Danny asks, confused. "Some kind of shapeshifter, or..." Sinnoh swallows hard, not wanting to go into detail. "Do you see the cloth that she's washing? It mirrors that worn by someone that is soon to die." "That's..." Danny whispers, horrified. Sinnoh again nods. "Yes, it's the robe of a mage." "Wait," Butler's fear rises drastically. "Are you saying that one of us is about to die?" "Not one of us," Zaya speaks up. "Look past her on the bank. She has 5 other robes." "Well, I guess you're safe," Alcine mutters, glancing towards Danny, "because those are all Provost robes." 6 robes, Butler stammers. "So only one of us is going to survive?" "This is nonsense," Zaya says. "It's all superstition. We can't go by something like this." "She isn't completely wrong," Sinnoh agrees. "Fate isn't unalterable. If you accept this as a guaranteed outcome, we will only serve to usher it about. What we have to do is fight against this and use it as motivation to stay alive. It's kind of hard to get out of your head, Rom says, visibly shaken. This thing isn't exactly some gypsy fortune teller. It's a supernatural creature with real power. The stream gurgled and chuckled, the sound utterly incongruous with the dread that had instantly congealed in the mages' hearts. The banshee, a wisp of sorrow given form, continued her grim laundry, her keening a low thrum that vibrated in their bones. 6 red robes, the crimson stark against the mossy green of the stream bank, were rhythmically plunged and wrung, each twist a tightening noose in their imaginations. Danny, still clutching her robe, seemed to be the only among them that had not caught on to what exactly was happening. Her voice, a strangled whisper. What is that? Sino, his face etched with grim lines, stepped forward, his hand raised to silence her. The air around him crackled with a faint protective energy. He had seen more battles and more horrors than any of them, save perhaps Butler. The weight of that experience was heavy on his shoulders. His gaze flickered to the blood-colored robes. "It's a banshee," he said, his voice low and grave. "And those are not a good sign." Scales began to manifest on his face and arms. A banshee is a spiritual umbre creature. Banshee? Like in the screaming kind? Butler asks, fear growing within him. While he cares deeply for his friends, among the mages his bravery does not rank among the highest. Only if we upset her, Sino replies. They're not a predatory kind of monster. They're spiritual beings, ill omens that appear to foretell tragedy and death. She picked the right place, Butler mutters. I can see why she is drawn here. There's a lot of death going on. You said that they can foretell death, Allure whispers. How? What does it mean, Dane? Spell it out plainly. Zaya, her hand instinctively moving to the hilt of her enchanted sword, asked, her voice tight with apprehension. Sino sighed, the sound like wind whistling through a graveyard. It means, he said, his gaze sweeping over their faces, that death is coming. A banshee washing robes. It's an omen. Death omen. Alcine, her usually bright eyes wide with fear, gasped. So, it's like a warning? Like it can be changed? Sino shakes his head. I don't know. I've only read about these things. This is the first time that I've seen one in person. So I'm in the same boat as the rest of you. But 6 robes. Laura's voice trembled. Support magic was her forte, healing and shielding her companions. Death was her antithesis, the one enemy she could never truly defeat. Does that mean 6 of us are going to die? Sino's silence was answer enough. Danny, her bravado crumbling, looked from face to face, her eyes pleading for reassurance. But it's just another monster, right? We can fight this. Sino placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. You should know by now that even magic has its limits. Some things are beyond our control. Fate, destiny, call it what you will. Sometimes it has its own plans. Zaya, however, was not ready to accept such fatalism. Her grip tightened on her sword's hilt, the metal gleaming in the dappled sunlight. So, we just stand here and wait for death to come knocking? Is that what you're suggesting? Her voice, though laced with fear, held a steely edge. No, Sinnoh said firmly, his gaze hardening. We don't stand here and do nothing. We assess the situation. We prepare. And if death comes for us, we will meet it with courage and defiance. Butler finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. But the robes, they're all red. They're all provost robes. He looked at each of them in turn. Sinnoh himself, Zaya, Alcine, Allure, and Rom. All of them were provosts, entitled to wear the crimson garment signifying their rank. Danny, still an apprentice, wore green. A new wave of dread washed over them, colder and more suffocating than the last. It wasn't just death that was coming. It was death specifically for those who had earned the right to wear the red. Allure shuddered. But why? Why us? We may never know the why, Sinnoh said, his voice heavy. But we can try to understand the how. Banshees don't just appear randomly. Something must have drawn it here. Something significant. Rom, her mind already racing, began to analyze the situation with a chilling detachment. Zuberi isn't here, she pointed out, her voice devoid of emotion. He's back at camp, and Danny wears green. That leaves the 6 of us. The 6 red robes, Alcine whispered, her eyes wide with terror. And there's 6 of us to see the Omen. Does that mean that the 6 of us specifically are going to die? The silence that followed was thick and heavy, broken only by the mournful keening of the banshee and the gentle murmur of the stream. Each of them was trapped in their own thoughts, grappling with the enormity of the situation. The last echo of Sinnoh's grave pronouncement hung in the air, heavier than the damp mist clinging to the stream. 6 red robes, churned ceaselessly in the water by the banshee's spectral hands. 6 mages marked for death. The vibrant green of Danny's apprentice robe suddenly felt like a spotlight, highlighting her exclusion from the deadly prophecy. She felt a surge of guilt mixed with a chilling relief. The silence that followed Sinnoh's words was thick, almost suffocating. The sounds of the forest, usually a comforting symphony, now seemed like a mocking chorus. Each rustle of leaves, each chirp of a bird, a countdown to their doom. Butler was the first to break the silence, his voice a strained whisper. All 6 of us. He ran a hand through his hair, his usual jovial face etched with a fear that aged him a decade. He glanced around at his companions, his eyes lingering on each red-robed figure. A flicker of suspicion, quickly suppressed, crossed his features. Was he thinking the same thing as the others? Who among them was expendable? Zaya, usually so stoic and self-assured, gripped the hilt of her katana, the knuckles of her hand white. The magical blade, normally a source of comfort and power, now felt like a cold weight, a grim reminder of the battle she had fought, and the battle she might not survive. Her eyes darted to the stream, then back to her fellow mages. Her breath hitched, and she whispered, This can't be real." Alcine, trembling, her connection to the natural world, usually a source of her strength, now amplified her fear. She could feel the frantic buzzing of insects, the skittering of unseen creatures, all mirroring the panic that was rising within her. Her eyes, wide, darted nervously around the clearing as if searching for an escape, a hidden path that would lead her away from this cursed place. A death omen. But how? Why? Her voice wavered, barely audible above the rushing water. She instinctively pulled her robe tighter around herself, as if trying to ward off the impending doom. Lore, whose magic was usually a balm, a source of healing and comfort, was pale. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch Rom's arm, seeking reassurance, a connection to reality. But Rom was lost in her own terror, her gaze fixed on the stream, her face ashen. Lore's touch was met with a flinch, a reflex born of raw primal fear. The support mage recoiled, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her. Her own magic felt useless, inadequate against the icy grip of fate. Rom, a mage known for her cool demeanor and sharp intellect, was now a picture of unraveling composure. Her eyes were wide and unseeing, fixed on the crimson robes bobbling in the stream. The color seemed to pulse, to throb, with a sinister energy. Her breath came in shallow gasps, as if the air itself was thinning and becoming poisonous. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to contain the tremors that racked her body. The thought of Zuberi, safe and oblivious back at the camp, only intensified her fear. Because he wasn't with them, does that mean that he is the only one safe from the Omen? Were the 6 of them going to die? It wasn't fair. If he hadn't stayed behind, they would all have an equal chance at survival. But now, Sinnoh, the most senior mage, stood ashen-faced, his usual air of authority replaced by a profound sense of dread. He had witnessed death omens before, had faced down creatures of nightmare, but this felt different. This was personal. He was one of the 6. The weight of his years, the burden of his knowledge, pressed down on him, crushing his spirit. He tried to maintain a semblance of control, to project an image of strength for the others. His voice wavered as he spoke. We must be vigilant. We must be prepared. But even his own words sounded hollow, insufficient against the chilling uncertainty that gripped them all. He knew deep down that no amount of preparation could truly shield them from fate. Danny felt a knot of guilt tighten in her stomach. She was spared, at least for now, but the thought of her mentors and her friends facing such a grim fate filled her with a helpless terror. She wanted to say something, to offer some word of comfort or hope, but the words died in her throat, choked by the oppressive atmosphere of fear. She looked at each of them, with their faces contorted by dread, and a horrifying realization dawned on her. They were already turning on each other. The seed of suspicion had been planted that was already beginning to sprout, poisoning the bonds of trust that had once held them together. Butler cleared his throat, his voice still unsteady. Perhaps it's a misunderstanding. Maybe the Banshee made a mistake. He glanced around, seeking validation. A shared denial of the inevitable, but no one met his gaze. They were all too consumed by their own fear, too focused on their own survival. Zaya shifted her weight, the scabbard of her katana scraping against the rough bark of the nearby tree. The sound was jarring in the oppressive silence, a sharp reminder of the danger they faced. She spoke, her voice low and tight. Or maybe it's a test, a trial. We have to prove ourselves worthy to overcome it. But even as she spoke, her eyes betrayed her doubt. She didn't believe her own words. Alcine, her voice barely a whisper, said, "Maybe if we destroy the robes." Her voice trailed off, the absurdity of the suggestion hanging in the air. Destroying the robes wouldn't change anything. The Omen had been given. Their fate had been sealed. Allure, desperate for a solution, any solution, suggested, maybe there's a way to change fate. Some kind of ritual, some kind of spell. But she knew, as she said the words, that it was unlikely. Changing fate was a dangerous game, one that often came with a terrible price. Rom remained silent, her gaze still fixed on the stream, her mind racing, trying to find a loophole, a way out of this nightmare. But the more she thought, the more hopeless she felt. The Banshee's omen was a death sentence, and they were all trapped, waiting for the executioner to strike. I refuse to believe that fate is unalterable, Butler says, his emotions quickly switching from despair to rage. If we accept an outcome as guaranteed, we're only going to serve to usher it about. What we need to do is fight against this, and use it as a motivation to stay alive. It's kind of hard to get out of your head, Rom says. Yeah, but we all wear identical robes, Butler asks, switching back from angry defiance to fear. How do we even know which of us the omens are about? It doesn't have to be about anyone, Danny speaks up. Don't let it spook you. We all need to have our heads clear before the tournament starts. Yeah, you can say that, Butler snaps. Your robe is the only one not being laundered by a freaking death omen. I mean, it is kind of insensitive, Alcine says. You aren't a part of this. You're literally the only one of us that is completely safe. Why don't we just ask the source? Zaya asks, pushing her way forward angrily. There's no sense standing here just guessing. Come on, stop, Sinnoh says. You're only going to make things worse. Worse? Zaya snaps. What could be worse than all of us dying? Butler pushes past them both, following Zaya's lead. Hey, Banshee, Butler shouts. Which of us is going to die? Don't draw its attention, Sinnoh shouts, his own fears no longer contained. I think that ship has already sailed, Rom mutters. The Banshee's head jerked up. Her face was a mask of death. Hollow eyes, a mouth stretched unnaturally wide, like a python unhinging its jaw to swallow prey whole. A sound erupted from her throat. Not a cry, but a rending, furious shriek that tore through the clearing like a blade. The forest shuddered. Trees swayed and limbs bent and broke. The stream convulsed, water slapping violently against its banks. As the mages reeled, only Sinnoh and Allure were quick enough to erect a barrier to protect their friends from the concussive force, but also the damaging effects of the scream itself. At such a pitch and intensity, eardrums would rupture and permanently damage a person's hearing and equilibrium. The shriek continued, its force cracking the twin barriers like breaking glass. Waves of dangerous sound rushed through the cracks. Alcine fell to her knees, clutching her ears, blood dripping between her fingers. Danny staggered back into Butler, who barely kept his footing. Rom screamed in pain, though no one could hear her through the Banshee's wail. Even at partial strength, the sound was still devastating. Sinnoh attempted to reinforce the barrier spell, but the sigils flickered and dispersed beneath the sonic assault. The Banshee surged forward, with a hiss like wind through a graveyard, her fingers elongated into claws of bone and blackness, slashing towards the mages. Allure looked up in discomfort, trying to concentrate and counter the threat through its continued screaming. The barrier holds for a moment, deflecting the first claw strike. The Banshee shifts her weight, slashing at the barrier with her other hand. The protective magic fails, shattering before the helpless mages. Basaya! A voice shouts from the side, just before a burst of black kinetic energy slams into the Banshee and propels her through several trees. The mages slowly recover, still disoriented and in pain. What was that all about? I could have heard that scream from Pluto. A banshee, Danny stammers, fighting the pain and nausea. Did it not get the memo? Jake asks. The tournament selection is over. That's what I said, Butler whispers, wiping a few droplets of blood from his upper lip. Jake looks over at where the blast impacted. The trees and undergrowth are on fire, but the banshee is nowhere to be seen. I guess she turned tail and ran, Jake says. Can't blame her, though. I wouldn't fuck with me either. That won't be the end of it, Sinnoh says, recomposing himself, quicker than his peers. She's marked us. Until she is dead or we are, her omen will come to be. Damn it! Rom bursts out, grabbing Butler forcefully by the front of his robe. Once again, you act without thinking. Now we're in a real mess. If Dane hadn't left out information, maybe I would have acted differently, Butler replies. He could have told us from the start that killing the Banshee would remove the curse. Sinnoh sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. It isn't for certain, just a possibility. It wasn't enough to act upon and risk all of us being killed. If Jake hadn't intervened, that Banshee would have slaughtered us. As of now, there is nothing we can do to change what has been seen. Fate is a river, and we are all but leaves caught in its current. We can only try to navigate the rapids and survive as long as we can. His words were not comforting. They were a surrender, an acceptance of their impending doom. The silence returned, heavier than before, punctuated only by the rushing water and the frantic beating of their hearts. The 6 red robes continued to churn in the stream, a macabre dance of death. The mages stood frozen, paralyzed by fear, each lost in their own private nightmare, wondering which of them would be the first to fall. Danny watched them, her heart aching. She wanted to reach out, to offer them comfort, to remind them of their strength, their courage, and their bond. But she knew that words were useless now. Fear had taken root, and it was consuming them, turning them against each other. The Banshee's omen had not only predicted their deaths, it had already begun to tear them apart. The force grew darker and more menacing. The sounds of the night began to emerge. The hooting of owls, the rustling of unseen creatures. Each sound seemed to amplify their fear, to draw them closer to the edge of madness. Butler shifted nervously, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. He whispered more to himself than to the others. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Zaya drew her sword, the blade gleaming in the fading light. She held it before her, but her hand trembled, and her face was pale with fear. Alcine huddled against a tree, her body shaking uncontrollably. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the images of death that filled her mind. Allure reached out to Rom again, but Rom remained unresponsive, lost in her own world of terror. Allure's hand fell to her side, her hope dwindling. Forget about it, Sinnoh says. We need to worry about healing and recovering our stamina before the tournament tomorrow. We can't spend all night chasing after a superstition. But you said, Butler begins, but is cut off. We can look for her after our first round matches. There should be waiting time in between each round, Sinnoh says. For now, we heal each other and rest up for tomorrow. I thought you were the team leader, Rom whispers to Danny. It's fine, Danny replies. He can lead us if he wants. With me in charge, we've had 4 casualties before the tournament even started. I've been a terrible leader. Don't be so hard on yourself, Zaya says, overhearing her. No one could have prepared for what we walked into. I'd be surprised if a master would have been able to change our outcome. This island is a giant hornet's nest, and we just came in wild, beating on it like reckless children. No matter what, someone was going to end up stung. As they walked, Rom spoke, her voice low. She quietly replied, her voice a hoarse whisper. We should get back to camp and warn Zuberi. Sinnoh considered this, his brow furrowed. Zuberi was a skilled mage, but he was also impetuous and prone to rash decisions. Knowing about the Omen might make him reckless, endangering himself and the others. Sinnoh shook his head. No, we can't risk bringing this curse to him. He's safer if he stays away. We shouldn't tell him what we saw. Not until we have a better understanding of the situation. We don't want to panic him unnecessarily. Rom's eyes flashed with anger. Safer? We're all going to die. What does it matter if he knows? It matters because there's still a chance he can survive, Sinnoh said, his voice firm. Allure nodded in agreement. He would try to protect us, even if it meant sacrificing himself. It's best to keep him in the dark for now. Danny, still shaken by what she had witnessed, spoke up hesitantly. But what if he's in danger too? What if the Banshee's omen extends beyond just those who were present to witness it? Sinnoh sighed. It's a risk we have to take. We can't afford to give in to fear and chaos. We need to remain calm and focused. His words were met with silence. No one wanted to be sacrificed. No one wanted to die. Danny watched them, her heart breaking. They were no longer a team, a band of mages united by a common purpose. They were just individuals driven by fear, each struggling to survive. The night deepened and the shadows grew longer. Now they were frozen, paralyzed by fear, waiting for death to claim them one by one. The death omen was not just a prediction. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy, tearing them apart from the inside out, long before any physical damage arrived. Their fear was the weapon, and the Banshee merely the messenger. Allure began to visibly crack. Her usually serene face, a picture of placid composure, honed through years of channeling healing energies, was now marred by a creeping pallor. Tiny beads of sweat erupted on her brow and her hands. Normally steady as she wove intricate spells, trembled almost imperceptibly. She swallowed hard, her gaze darting nervously between her companions. The implications were obvious, horrifyingly so. One of them, maybe more. Butler was fighting a losing battle against his own fear. A muscle twitched uncontrollably in his jaw, and his eyes, usually sharp and calculating, now held a flicker of raw animal panic. He crossed his arms tightly as if trying to contain the terror that threatened to erupt from within. The knowledge that death was circling them, singling out its prey, was a vice tightening around its chest. He thought of his ambitions and the decades of work that would be rendered meaningless in an instant. Zaya stood still as a statue, but the subtle tremors that ran through her frame betrayed her inner turmoil. Her hand instinctively went to the hilt of her enchanted blade, a weapon that had cleaved through countless enemies, but against death itself was useless. She prided herself on her courage, her unwavering resolve in the face of danger. But this was different. This wasn't a battle she could win with steel or spells. This was an insidious, unseen enemy, one that preyed on fear and uncertainty. Alcine was a study in suppressed hysteria. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, darted around the clearing, as if searching for an escape route, and a way to cheat fate. Her breathing was shallow and rapid, and she clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The thought of her beloved insects, extensions of her own will and being, left to fend for themselves, pierced her with an unbearable grief. She had always felt a certain kinship with the delicate ephemeral nature of insects, but now that fragility felt like a curse. But Rom's reaction was the most unsettling of all. Her mind was already racing and calculating odds, weighing options and searching for a loophole in the grim prophecy. Was there a way to influence fate, to divert death's gaze? She would refuse to believe that this apparition could have so much power over her. How could a banshee dictate the life and death of others? It was not divine, it was barely even sentient. The banshee was a lowly creature that had no right to control their fate. More so than the others, Rom was filling with rage rather than fear or despair. Danny, now standing slightly apart from the others, felt like an outsider looking in on a macabre play. As an apprentice, her green robes marked her as exempt from the prophecy, but that offered little comfort. She was still one of them, bound to these mages by loyalty and friendship, and the thought of losing any of them filled her with a cold dread. She watched their faces, saw the fear and paranoia etched into their features, and felt a pang of helplessness. She was too inexperienced to offer any real assistance, any tangible hope. Sinnoh, the senior mage, bore the weight of responsibility with grim acceptance. He knew that his role was to maintain order, to guide them through this crisis, but even he felt the tendrils of fear creeping into his heart. He met each of their gazes in turn, trying to project an aura of calm, but he could see the doubt reflected back at him. They were all wondering the same thing. Who would be the first to fall? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, broken only by the gentle murmur of the stream and the frantic chirping of the unseen birds. Each mage was trapped in their own private hell, consumed by fear and suspicion. They were allies, friends, comrades in arms, but in this moment they were all potential victims desperate to survive. Allura stole a glance at Butler. He was a powerful mage, respected and admired, but was also ruthless and ambitious. Would he sacrifice one of them to save himself? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Butler, in turn, caught Zaya's eye. The sword mage was fiercely independent and loyal to a fault, but she was also fiercely protective of her own life. Would she be willing to fight dirty to ensure her own survival? He couldn't be sure. Zaya's gaze drifted to Alcine. The insect mage was eccentric and unpredictable, but she was surprisingly resourceful. Would she unleash her swarms of insects to defend herself, regardless of the consequences of the others? It was a chilling possibility. Alcine looked at Rom. Rom was an enigma. She interacted with the rest of them the least. In fact, she did not give off the same vibe as the others that they were all friends and teammates. They were in this together, yet Rom seemed to be fighting for her own reasons. Would she orchestrate a scenario that would guarantee her own safety, even if it meant sacrificing one of them? Halcyon shuddered at the thought. And Rom's eyes flicked back to Sinnoh. The senior mage was their leader, their protector, but he was only human. Would he be able to make the difficult choices that needed to be made? Or would he succumb to the same fear and paranoia that was gripping them all? Sinnoh's gaze fell upon Danny. The apprentice was young and inexperienced, but she possessed a spark of courage and compassion that he admired. Would she be able to rise above the fear and find a way to help them? Or would she be consumed by the darkness that threatened to engulf them all? Danny looked back at Sinnoh, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that they were all looking to her, searching for a sign, a glimmer of hope. But she had nothing to offer them but her own fear and uncertainty. She was just an apprentice, a green robe amidst a sea of crimson. She felt utterly powerless. The stream continued to flow, carrying the red robes onward, a silent testament to their impending doom. The Banshee's Omen had been delivered, and the mages were left to grapple with the consequences, each trapped in their own web of fear and paranoia, wondering who would be the first to die. The bonds of friendship and loyalty that had once united them were fraying, replaced by a gnawing sense of self-preservation. The true test had begun, not of their magical prowess, but of their character, their morality, their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. And as the silence stretched on, they each knew, deep down, that not all of them would pass. Zaya was already strategizing, her mind dissecting each possible threat, every potential weakness. She would not go down without a fight. She would make death earn its prize. Danny, overwhelmed by the sheer weight of the situation, felt a surge of guilt. She was spared simply by the virtue of her inexperience. She was not yet worthy of the red robe, and that unworthiness had inadvertently saved her life. Sinnoh watched them all, his mind racing with worry. It was his responsibility to guide them, to protect them and make the right decisions. But how could he possibly lead them when he himself was grappling with the chilling certainty of his own mortality? He knew that they couldn't stay here paralyzed by fear. They needed to move, to act, to do something. Anything was better than simply waiting for the inevitable. Jake noticed the mages starting to pull away from each other and cast suspicious glares in the direction of their comrades. He could feel the tension and the fear in the air. "What did I miss?" he whispers to Danny. "Did something happen before that Banshee attacked?" "Jake," Danny whispers, "you need to keep this a secret. It's already beginning to tear us apart." "What is it? I am so damn confused." "The Banshee is an omen of death. Whoever's clothing you see being washed in the stream is going to die." "And y'all believe in that bunk?" Jake is surprised. He never would have guessed the skilled and scholarly mages would be broken by a simple old-world superstition. "And how many black cats have you seen on the island? What about stepping on cracks? I did think I heard an owl earlier. Doesn't that mean someone's going to die too?" "We need to leave," Sinnoh said, his voice firm, brooking no argument. "Now. We need to get back to camp, regroup, and prepare. We don't know what's coming, but we'll face it together." Zaya's eyes narrowed. She didn't believe in fate or destiny or any such nonsense. She believed in action, will, and the power of her sword. She would not let some wailing ghost dictate her future. She would find a way to defy the Omen, to cheat death, and survive. With a renewed sense of determination, she turned and hurried to catch up with the others, her hand never straying far from the hilt of her sword. The air around them thrummed with a mixture of fear and defiance. They were mages, provosts of their order, and they would not surrender to death without a fight. The Banshee may have washed their robes, but she had not yet claimed their lives. They intended to make her work for every single one. As they continued to trek through the forest, the weight of the death omen pressed down on them like a physical burden. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sounded like the approach of the Grim Reaper. They were acutely aware of their own mortality, the fragility of life. Zaya scanned the surroundings ever vigilant, her senses heightened. She felt a palpable sense of unease, as if they were being watched. "We're not alone," she murmured, her voice barely audible. Sinnoh stopped, his hand raised to signal the others to halt. He closed his eyes, focusing on his magical senses. He could feel it too, presence, lurking just beyond the edge of their perception. "Something's out there," he confirmed, his voice grim. "Be ready." The group slowed, exchanging wary glances. The oppressive heat of the jungle seemed to grow heavier, the usual hum of insects now eerily muted. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Jake adjusted his stance, his eyes narrowing as he peered through the thick foliage. "How many?" he asked. Sinnoh didn't answer immediately. His focus was elsewhere, his magical senses reaching out. The magic he felt was wrong, wild and ancient, pulsing through the ground and the trunks of the trees around them. "Not people," he finally said. "Something older, hungrier." A faint groan rippled through the air, like the deep creak of an old ship's timbers. Danny stiffened, instinctively moving a step closer to Allure, her fingers brushing the hilt of a dagger. Alcine tilted her head, listening. "That's not wind," she said. The jungle around them shifted, subtle at first, the rustle of leaves and the swaying of branches. But then the movement grew purposeful. Roots thick as a man's arm slid across the ground, curling towards the group like serpents. The trees loomed, their trunks unnaturally bent, bark splitting to reveal slick, fibrous muscles beneath. One of them, taller than the rest, split open along its midsection, revealing a gaping maw, lined with rows of thorn-like teeth. A stench of rotting vegetation washed over the party as a thick vine lashed out towards Butler. He barely ducked aside, the vine striking the ground where he had been standing and gouged a deep furrow in the soil. "Yataveo," Sinnoh barked, recognition flashing in his eyes. He drew a curved blade in one swift motion. "Man-eating trees! Stay off the roots!" Before anyone could answer, another vine snapped out, wrapping around Rom's ankle. Sinnoh roared toward the threat, swinging his blade down to sever it. But even as the vine fell away, two more whipped toward him. Jake surged forward, a blade of black flame springing to life in his hand. He slashed through the nearest vine, the cut searing shut with the heat of his energy. "Keep moving," Zaya shouted, her voice sharp over the chaos. She thrust her palms forward, a burst of cutting wind slicing through an approaching tangle of roots. They recoiled briefly, sap spraying into the air. The reprieve was short-lived. More branches writhed towards them from all sides. Alcine dropped to one knee, her hands pressing into the soil. A swarm of chittering beetles burst forth from the ground, racing up the trunks of the nearest trees to gnaw at their bark. The Yataveo let out a deep, resonant groan, shuddering under the attack, but their hunger only seemed to sharpen. Allure drew in a deep breath, summoning a coil of flame around her arm, before hurling it into a gaping tree maw. The fire caught in the fibrous interior, black smoke curling upward as the creature recoiled. Danny darted past her, slicing through a vine that had been aiming for Zaya's throat. Still, for every severed vine, two more seemed to take its place. The ground itself seemed alive now, roots snaking through the soil, tangling around their boots, trying to trip them or drag them down. Butler leapt back from one grasping root, throwing a pouch of powder to the ground. The burst of acrid smoke it produced made the nearest tree hesitate, its maw snapping in agitation. "They're hurting us," Sinnoh warned, parrying a vine strike with his sword before sending a crackling bolt of lightning down its length. The smell of scorched plant flesh filled the air. "They're trying to drive us toward the thicker growth." "Then we break through there," Jake said, his firm tone. Black fire coiled tighter around his blade, flaring in the damp air. He slashed a path forward, burning through vines and roots alike. But even as he cut ahead, more trees bent toward the group, their maws gaping wider. Sap, thick, reddish, almost like blood, dripped from their teeth as the Yataveo closed in. The air was thick with the smell of decay and the hiss of moving foliage, every tree around them bending unnaturally toward the kill. The jungle had come alive, and it meant to devour them whole. The Yataveo closed in, their massive trunks bending and twisting like living predators. Branches whipped forward with the speed of striking snakes, tipped with jagged thorns meant to pierce flesh. The ground was a tangle of coaling roots, shifting underfoot as though the island itself wanted to drag the intruders down into the dark, wet soil. Her sword flashed, silver in the gloom, each slash quick and precise. A thick branch lunged for her, but she sidestepped and spun low, her blade crossing a vicious X-shaped cut that sheared the limb clean off. Sap gushed from the wound, the tree groaning as it pulled back. Before it could strike again, Allure hurled a searing ribbon of flame over Zaya's shoulder, catching the damaged trunk and blacking it to the core. On the opposite side, Butler fought with a grim economy of motion, his sword arcs heavy and deliberate. He took a branch head-on, letting it slam against the flat of his blade before twisting his wrist and cleaving downward. The severed limb hit the dirt with a wet thud, still twitching. Another vine whipped toward him from behind, but he pivoted sharply and took it at the base, hacking until the fibers split apart and recoiled into the undergrowth. A massive root surged from the ground toward Jake, but he leapt onto it, sprinting along its length. As he reached the tree's trunk, he dropped into a spin kick, his heel engulfed in black fire. The impact blasted through the bark, charring the interior in a hiss of steam and sap. The tree shrieked with a deep, hollow resonance before swaying backward. Another trunk split open ahead of him, revealing a gaping maw lined with thorn-like teeth. Jake darted forward, ducking under a branch swipe, then slammed a burning uppercut straight into the inside of the maw. The black flame exploded upward, the creature's groan rising into a bellow as smoke poured from its mouth. Alcine knelt low, her eyes narrowed in focus. As her hands pressed to the ground, the jungle floor trembled before hundreds of glossy, black-shelled beetles surged up from the soil. They swarmed up the trunks, disappearing into gaps in the bark. Moments later, the Yataveo's movements became erratic, as the beetles were gnawing into their fibrous muscles from within. Several branches slowed, shaking violently to dislodge the pests, only to have more crawl over them in relentless waves. Danny darted between Butler and Sinnoh, using her smaller blade to cut vines, aiming for their legs. "They're trying to pull us under," she shouted as a thick root looped around her ankle. She slashed it free before it could tighten. Above her, Sinnoh spun his sword and slammed it against the ground, sending a jolt of lightning into the network of roots beneath them. The crackle of power lit the tangle-like vines, making the nearest tree spasm in pain. A towering Yataveo lunged at Zaya from behind, its maw yawning wide enough to swallow her whole. She spun, her sword igniting in Alora's fire, and plunged it into the center of its mouth. The flames roared up the inside of the trunk, the tree convulsing violently before collapsing backward into the other. "Keep moving," Jake barked, kicking a branch aside and sending sparks of black flame spiraling into the canopy. "They're trying to close the circle again." The mages pressed forward, the ground shaking under the movement of the roots. Flames from Alora's magic lit the darkness, the red-orange glow painting the twisted bark like molten veins. The scent of scorched wood mixed with the wet, choking smell of sap. Still the trees attacked, their hunger unbroken. Every step was a battle. Dodging whipping branches, hacking through coiling roots, leaping clear of snapping maws. Alcine's beetles continued their work unseen inside the trunks, creating sudden collapses when the beetles chewed too deep. Zaya and Butler cut paths in different directions, their blades gleaming in the firelight, while Jake's burning strikes left smoldering holes in whatever dared to get close. Jake sidesteps an extending branch and quickly hops again to dodge a second. The trees continue attacking, and Jake snaps a kick upwards as another speeds towards him, breaking the limb in half. Pivoting, the team throws a hand out to consume one of the trees on black flame. Jake's senses suddenly sharpen on alert, the hair on the back of his neck standing up. He barely has enough time to bring his arms up to defend, as the assassin Descarina darts from the darkness like a blur, and drives them both through the grove like a hawk. The team's back is up against the trunk of a Yatavea, before slowly pushing them backward. "Well, aren't you the opportunist?" "I don't care about this tournament one bit," Descarina growls, straining to push harder. Her veins bulge, and Jake begins to grimace in pain. "The only reason I am here is to kill you and those mages." "Gaining more power and a shiny angelic weapon never factored into your decision, right?" Jake asks sarcastically. Descarina quickly pulls her arm back and throws a roundhouse kick from the left, but Jake immediately rotates his right forearm to the side to block. The impact is harsh, and Jake tries not to show any visible indications of pain that he feels. The Yataveo behind Jake reaches out, but the teen evades its branches and hooks Descarina's extended leg as he turns, throwing her towards the arboreal creature's open mouth. Growling in anger, the assassin immediately slices the tree in half with a single horizontal swipe of the claws. "We got too many things going on here," Jake says quickly, surrounded by a group of hungry trees. "Care to take this someplace less crowded?" Descarina turns, her aura flaring out to knock several of the trees clear to Jake. Rather than reply, the assassin begins rapidly hurling bursts of energy at him. The team weaves in and out of the trees, using them as cover. "The Arbor Day Foundation is sure gonna be pissed at you," he says, the trees all around him now on fire. Descarina growls, unamused by the teen's jokes. She rushes, pushing Jake back on the defensive. The two weave around the burning trees, desperately pressing the offensive. Jake kicks one of the trees as he dodges behind it, hurling burning embers into Descarina's face. The assassin brings her hands up to defend, but Jake thrusts low and forward, driving an elbow into Descarina's gut. Eyes bulging, Descarina is strewn back, crashing into a row of burning trees. With a scream of exertion, Jake throws both hands out and unleashes a massive wave of black flame energy. The flames collide into the grove where Descarina landed. A brilliant explosion ensues, momentarily drawing the attention of the mages, still engaged in their own battles. Those two are really going at it, Butler says, cutting through the outstretched limbs of several Yataveo. You'd think they'd save it for the tournament. It isn't about a match to them, Danny says. Neither of them care about winning or losing. It's a fight to the death. And all of us will need to treat our own fights the same, Sinnoh says, reinforcing the protective barrier that is holding back not just the man-eating trees, but also the spreading flames. The type of enemies we'll be up against aren't going to be satisfied with a simple knockout. Because of that spell giving you the power of those you kill on this island, mercy is off the table. It will increase their chances going forward to kill their opponents and gain that energy boost. Well, I guess that mutant is trying to gain an advantage in the first round by killing Jake, Butler says. It's not a terrible idea, honestly. We would have benefited from going on the attack ourselves. And we would have also increased our chances of dying recklessly, Sinnoh counters. We need to get back to our camp as soon as possible. These woods are far too dangerous to stay in. Descarina speeds out of the flames, connecting with a hard right hook across Jake's jaw. The teen is rocked by the blow, nearly taking him off his feet. Planting his pivot foot firmly, Jake prevents himself from staggering and counters with a hard left hook. The blow connects solidly, but as Descarina stumbles, her tail wraps around Jake's neck. Descarina pulls Jake off the ground and drags him along the forced floor as she begins to run. Jake coughs and chokes, clawing at the appendage to free himself, finally manifesting a sharp blue shard of energy. Jake reaches back to stab Descarina's tail repeatedly until he is released. Coughing, Jake slowly stands back up. He rubs his sore neck, a reddened ring now visible around his throat that burns. How about we call this fight a draw and pick it back up tomorrow in the tournament? You won't live to see tomorrow, Descarina growls, her claws remaining extended. Didn't us sparing you in our fight at the hospital count for something? You humiliated me, she screams, her aura flaring out violently. And you killed the doctor. You completely destroyed my life. To be fair, I wasn't the one that squished him like a bug. Well, he was a bug, so I guess squished him like a doctor. Damn you! Descarina screams in rage, her aura exploding outward in all directions. There's a crackling red discharge. Streaks of red electricity like energy flash like lightning throughout the assassin's aura. Now I've done it, Jake whispers to himself. In my big damn mouth. Sinnoh backs up beside Jake, finishing off a Yataveo with an Aganestra fire blade. You kinda need to wrap this up. We've about finished off all the evil shrubbery. Yeah, I don't think this is gonna be that easy. This is like a potential second or third round matchup, and she's trying to give it away for free on the pre-show. This fight is totally good enough to be on a pay-per-view. Jake stops to think for a moment. If Lian Kui is going to be like a Hogan versus Andre the Giant, Then I suppose me and Descarina is going to be like a Kane versus Mick Foley or something. Though I don't like the implication of me being Foley in that scenario. It's my analogy, so I think Kane versus The Undertaker would be more apropos. A clash of two titans that just isn't quite main event status. Sino stares at Jake awkwardly. I have no idea what you're talking about. WWF. World Wrestling Federation? Pro Wrestling? Jeez. How long have you been living in Magic Land? You're missing out on a lot of pop culture and sports, Jake says, disappointed. Like, most of my jokes aren't going to hit if you don't get the references. Don't let him lie to you, Danny speaks up. Even knowing the references, he's still not that funny. How did I get stranded on an island with such uncultured swine? Jake mutters in jest. People pretending to fight doesn't carry much intrigue when real fights to the death are only seconds away, Danny says. Before Jake can respond, Descarina shoots forward with explosive speed, throwing all of her power behind another right hook. The blow cracks sharply against Jake's jaw and sends the teen sprawling back dozens of yards. Jake's back hits the ground hard and he continues to bounce several more times helplessly, before the momentum finally halts. Jake groans in pain and disorientation, still lying on his back. Sino pivots to attack Descarina with an offensive spell, but the assassin outspeeds him and grabs the mage by his wrist. Rather than submit, Sino's arm hardens with scales, and his eyes become yellow with reptilian slitted pupils. You have GX. Descarina is caught off guard, her aura lessening. How is that possible? Your old boss infected me during our raid at the hospital, Sino replies with a deepening growl, as his teeth elongate into fangs. And I'm sort of starting to get the hang of it now. Descarina releases her grip on Sino's arm and leaps backward. This won't be the end. Before the tournament is concluded, I will make sure that each and every one of you is dead. I look forward to it, Sino growls. Just thinking about fighting you for real. Has the GX parasite in my blood all fired up. Descarina snorts, almost as if she finds that to be humorous. I'll be watching, always. If I see the opportunity, I will take it. With that, the assassin melts back into the shadows from whence she came. Allura and Danny tend to the barely conscious Jake. Unable to speak, Jake makes unintelligible grunts and moans. His jaw is shattered, and I think his skull has been fractured. He has a bad concussion as well, Allura says, examining him with her vast knowledge as a healer. Can you fix him? Danny asks, concerned. Allura nods. Just watch my back for a few minutes. The last embers of Allura's healing magic faded as Jake finally let out a rattling groan that sounded more like relief than pain. His jaw, once hanging crooked now, was set straight, though deep bruising still bloomed beneath his skin. He blinked at the firelight and shadows of the jungle, his eyes groggy but alive. That hurt more than I want to admit, he rasped, his voice low and raw. You don't have to admit anything, Danny said, helping him to sit up while keeping a wary eye on the tree line. We've already seen your tough guy act tonight. Rom kicked away a charred Yataveo branch, scanning the darkness where Descarina had vanished. She won't be far, not with a grudge like that. Butler sheathed his blade, his voice calm but firm. Then we move now. If she's watching, we make it harder for her to follow. The tournament starts at dawn. We don't need another fight before then. Zaya, wiping sap from her sword, added, We've thinned the grove enough to pass through, but the jungle's alive with too many things that want us dead. The camp's our best chance to regroup. Alcine's swarm of beetles skittered back towards her from the underbrush, their work on the Yataveo done. The forest mood hasn't changed, she murmured. It still feels hungry. Whatever's on this island, we've only scratched the surface. Sinnoh stepped forward, his expression unreadable beneath the faint yellow glow lingering in his altered eyes. We'll be ready for whatever it throws at us, but for now we leave. Butler and Zaya murmured simultaneous incantations, coaxing small, restless spheres of elemental fire into existence above their upturned palms. These were not steady torches, but agitated spirits of flame that bobbled and weaved, casting a chaotic, sputtering orange glow against the oppressive wall of vegetation. The jungle canopy above had knit itself into a solid ceiling of interlocking branches, choking out the moonlight and plunging the group into a suffocating tunnel of green and black. As they trekked downward toward the coast, the erratic magical light threw long, distorted shadows that danced wildly against the tree trunks, transforming gnarled roots into the illusion of crouching beasts. The air grew heavy and humid, filled with the drone of invisible insects, and the group tightened their formation. Every snapping twig under a boot or inexplicable rustle in the dense undergrowth sent a jolt of adrenaline through the line, keeping fingers white-knuckled on the hilts of their swords. Jake, still shaky, managed to smirk despite the pain. You know, between the murder trees and a psychotic lizard lady with an uncomfortable attachment to her physician, I think we finally finished the pre-show for this tournament. We can only hope, Danny sighs. Otherwise, this is going to be a long night.